Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
All right, welcome back to Podcast 40 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at OBKiev or tweet us at The Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media /The Odds Breakers. We have a fantastic show for you today, my friends. Marco D'Angelo from Wager Talk is here to discuss the Mountain West Conference as well as a little bit of NFL Preseason Week 3. This episode is being brought to you by uwager.lv. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit uwager. Use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you get all that. If you want to become a patron subscriber, you can get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free Picks newsletter subscriber. Before we get into Marco, I wanted to talk a little bit about, how people are looking at strength of schedule these days. I think in some cases, you can account for it a little bit too much, especially when it comes to the NFL. In college, strength of schedule is that much more important because these coaches are bringing in certain levels of recruits, and you can just tell how successful they are over years with college kids. Alabama's going to be tough. There's no question about it. Florida's going to be tough. There's no question about it. When it comes to the NFL, some teams you think were supposed to be tough end up faltering. For example, last year, the Green Bay Packers were supposed to win 10 games. According to a lot of Vegas win totals, they only came up with 6. 6 games. People were all worried about Andrew Luck last year in 2018, and they ended up winning 10 games and were very injured. The Chicago Bears last year, from their 2017 season, they only won 5-6 games. Their win total was around 6.5, and they won 12 games. Last year, the Niners were supposed to win 8.5, 9 games, and they ended up winning about 4 games. So as you see, strength of schedule is a lot more of a flip of a coin in the NFL. You don't know if the strength of schedule is going to end up hard or end up easy. The Green Bay Packers, people said they had the hardest schedule coming into last year. Well, their schedule ended up being considered easier than the average schedule. That is the discrepancy here. People are looking at the Chicago Bears saying you had one of the easiest schedules, even though preseason it was projected to be one of the harder ones. They say, well, according to the wins of the teams that you played, it wasn't that high, so you actually had an easy schedule. Well, part of that reason was because, the Bears beat you, and you factor that in, it looks like their schedule was easier, all those teams that lost to the Bears. So people are looking at it like, the Bears had an easy schedule last year, so this year's it's really hard because, of course, they have the 2 at-large games of first place. But how does that factor into you knowing that all these teams are going to be tough this year when it's always different in the NFL because there's so much parity? The NFL sets itself up for teams to move back to the mean, to regress back to the mean a lot more than college does. How is everybody down on the Bears this year because of that? And obviously I'm a Bear fan, so just take what I say with a grain of salt. But the Chicago Bears, They were one of the youngest teams in the NFL last year. First year with Nagy. And then now they're saying they're going to be worse and go under 9 wins. I cannot understand that, especially in the NFL, when strength of schedule does not factor in nearly as much as it does in college football. I think some people are really confusing that. So my number on the Bears is 9.6. So I'm not going over either because I need a 1.5 game variance there. But I'm pretty confident that the Chicago Bears are being undervalued now, and you might get some early line value on this team.
The dynasty has just begun.
All right, well, there's my rant about my favorite team. Let's see if it all comes into fruition. But hopefully I have some valid points there before you start fading the Bears, because every other better and betting podcast has kind of been seeing to jump on that trend, similar to how everyone's treating the Texas Longhorns this year as well. And now I am very excited to introduce one of the best and well-respected handicappers in all of Las Vegas. You've seen and heard from him many times on YouTube and the Wager Talk podcast. I am pleased to welcome back Mr. Marco D'Angelo from WagerTalk.com. You can follow Marco on Twitter at Marco in Vegas. Last time we spoke, Marco, was the Belmont, where you helped give me that winning horse, Sir Winston, and thank you very much for that. How did the rest of your summer go?
The rest of the summer went well, but unfortunately, I think if I remember in that Belmont, we gave you a nice long shot winner, but I think my exact words were whenever you were running down the field and we got to the horse that actually ran second, I think I answered hell no when we did it. And he snuck in there to beat us on the exacta, but we still had a good day.
You know, it was funny. The trifecta was the horse I left off. It was that number 1 horse. I think it was on the back of that trifecta, and that was the only one I left off. But that's horse racing for you, you know. I mean, but I was happy with the winner. I Win Place showed him and had him, and I did have a small exact on that too. So that was fantastic, Marco. You know, that was a sneaky horse right there, but you know your ponies, and I really appreciate that.
Well, that's what we try to do.
Absolutely, man. And so let's talk a little bit about how you prepare for a college football season or NFL football season. When you're handicapping futures and season win totals, what are the factors that you look at?
Well, I'm going to tell you the first things that you want to look at as a bettor, and just giving you a little bankroll lesson here. You got to decide if betting futures are right for you. If you're betting here in Las Vegas at a sports book, you know that you're putting the money up when you make the bet. And if you're playing futures, your money's going to be tied up for 4 to 6 months. You got to understand if your bankroll is capable of putting money tied up that long, and if you do, what percentage of your bankroll do you want to do? Because you do want to have access to your funds to do your week-to-week. Sometimes you might find yourself, if you get a sweet number later in the week, you might be coming back and trying to middle that game. So you don't ever want to run your bankroll short. Now, I can tell you that if you're playing at a place far, far away, offshore, and a lot of the pros have accounts offshore, we know that. A lot of them, because of their status, have credit accounts. That's where they play their futures. This way, they're not tying their money up. It's a credit account. They don't have to worry about what that money is until that future bet, wins or loses at the end of the season. So those are just a couple things from a handicapping standpoint of bankroll management that you need to do. Remember that when you're playing season win totals, this is basically, an even money wager. You're not going to win more than you risk. It's a single wager. Now, obviously, if you're betting a team to win the Super Bowl or win the national championship, you're going to get odds. But remember, only one of those tickets are going to cash. So you're going to tie money up for that period of time. And if you have an underdog, that's at a decent price, and you're going to knock off one of those teams that a Clemson or an Alabama, you might actually end up with more money doing a mechanical parlay, and by that I mean just rolling your wagers over when they get to the championship. Maybe start your wager in one of the conference championship games. Then that gets them into the playoff, and you roll that money over into the first playoff game, and then roll it again into the championship game. If they're going to end up being a dog in all of those games, you're definitely going to come out with more money. As far as what to look at when you are handicapping and trying to figure if this team is going to exceed the season win total, well, you first and foremost, you're always going to start and look at the schedule and look at how many games they're going to be favored in. Figuring that, Vegas is going to know, which team's better. Look at a trusted set of power ratings. We have a lot of guys at Wager Talk that put their power ratings out for free. One of the guys we talked about just before we went on air, our guy Ralph Michaels from Cal Sports provides a lot of information over at Wager Talk. You could pick that stuff up. So if you see a team's going to be a sizable favorite in X number of games, that's a good starting point. From there, you'll look at what I feel everybody looks at first, and it's the glamour position. It's the quarterback, and rightfully so. But almost as important to me, and it's the most underrated section of handicapping, Kiev, is the offensive line. People just really don't pay enough attention to the offensive line. And to me, if you don't have a good offensive line, it's the equivalent of trying to drive a car with a flat tire. You're not going to get very far. So I like to see a team that's got a lot of experience returning on the offensive line. That's going to give you a good start to the season because it's going to give you your blocking you need for your running game. It's going to give you the protection you need in your passing game, and that's going to give you a leg up. If you've got a good offensive line and a returning quarterback and a few skill position players, that's a team that I'm going to look to be on rather than betting against. And then the other thing, and we'll be talking about this when we do a conference preview today, too often people don't look at the actual schedule itself. Are there stretches where a team might be playing 3 games out of 4 on the road? Conferences that have divisions. This is something you've got to look at because you're always going to play everybody in your division, but you're not going to play everybody in the other division. So you've got to look and see which teams drew the lucky straw and bypassed the best teams. An example would be the Big Ten. If you're in the other division and you miss Ohio State and Michigan for the crossover games, that's a hell of an advantage for that team versus the other teams in their division that have to play Ohio State and Michigan in addition to their tough schedule. Too many people don't look at that. That's something that I definitely look at when you're laying out the schedule. Those are the things that I would say are the best to be looking at when you're starting to do your season win totals, going over or under the totals, and winning the divisions.
100%, Marco. It's not just the strength of the schedule coming up, it's also the spots. So love what you said there. And I know you've told me you've looked at things like returning production, and you favor that as well, especially like you premised on the offensive line. And I've heard you say many times looking at the turnover count of the year before, because a lot of times that evens itself out, doesn't it?
Yeah, and one other part that I forgot to mention, and this is a big one. Too often you're going to see, we've got coaching changes every year. Some of the coaching changes, you got a big-name coach coming in, taking over a program, and all of a sudden you've got all kinds of excitement, and everybody starts jumping on that bandwagon, and this team's going to be instantly better. Example last year, Scott Frost, come to Nebraska with fanfare. Well, they opened up the season losing their first 6 games of the year. And the thing that you've got to remember, when a new coach comes in, he inherits the players that the previous coach recruited. Look at it, every team. How many true freshmen make an impact if they get to play as a true freshman. They really don't. So you're not going to see him using his recruits that first year. Now, he did use one of them as a freshman, and that was the quarterback, Adrian Martinez, which I will tell you, I love this kid, and he's going to have a big year at Nebraska this year. But when you have a new system and players that were recruited for the old system, sometimes it doesn't work out well because you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Those new coaches sometimes takes 2 or 3 years before you really see the benefits because of them getting all of their players into the system that they want. Now, you did see a drastic improvement in Nebraska last year after starting 0-6. They finished the season 4-2, and the 2 losses were both by a touchdown or less, and both occurred on the road. One of them was at Ohio State, and one of them was at Iowa. So that team definitely gelled later in the season as they were starting to pick up all of the stuff, and moving forward, that team's going to be even better in year 2 and year 3 of a new coach.
100%. It's a new system. You don't get on right away. I mean, I'd rather look at Appalachian State that returns their production and promoted the next guy up that knows the kids. The kids trust him to buy into before buying that hype. It's a good handicapping advice to go against that hype when you know it's a completely new system and those were not his kids. We've seen it many times. Heck, we've seen it in the NBA with the Lakers. LeBron gets over there. Nobody buys in that first year, right? And it happens in many sports. So excellent point. And I might mention that Nebraska was the easiest under 6.5 win total that I think I've ever won on. So that was very nice. But yeah, they did get way better at the end of the year. All right, my man. Let's get into the Mountain West Conference. And I got to tell you, I love this conference just because I love the teams. I love the parity. I love some of the distance they travel, the going up high in the elevation to the very lows at the coast. This is a fantastic football conference to me, my man. Let's start right away at Boise State. Boise State, when last time I looked, they were at plus 110 to win the Mountain West. They looks like they were a positive 0.46 yards per play, pretty high on the turnover ratio last year. They were plus 11. Season win total is 10. What are your thoughts on Boise State?
Well, it's going to start with they got to replace Brett Ripien. He had a fantastic career at Boise State. You also got to replace their running back, Alexander Madison, in 2 of their top receivers. From an offense last year, as you said, this offense just was rolling. 460 yards a game, 35 points per game. But we've seen it so often that in some of these programs, it's almost you can plug and play the quarterbacks because it's as much the system as it is the quarterback. Now, let's face it, Brett Ripien had a really good pedigree as a quarterback for sure, but I think they'll be just fine bringing in the new guy. Now, the thing that was really good on this team last year that got overshadowed because the offense was so good, the defense only allowed 366 yards a game, 22 points per game in a conference that could score a lot of points. Defense was not the norm for the Mountain West Conference. And as good as they were last year, they've got 7 starters returning. 10 of the top 13 tacklers are back. They are getting a new defensive coordinator. So you're going to see maybe a few little changes, tweaks to that defense, but it was really good, and you got just about everybody back, key players. I wouldn't expect them to do too much to mess up with that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think you're going to rely on that defense, and I think the offense might get out of the gate a little slow, but I think you'll see after 2-3 games will start to build up a head of steam, and this is a team that this is their division to win. They get a big scheduling break, as we talked about when you have those crossover games. You look at Boise State's schedule, and they miss the 2 big guns from the other division. They don't face San Diego State. They don't face Fresno State. And their toughest game is going to be at the end of the season, next to last game, at Utah State. That game's on November 23rd. They should have things wrapped up by then. But if they don't, that'll be the game that decides it if Utah State can, pull the upset. This is a team, for me, Boise State is the team to beat in the Mountain West.
Yeah, I agree. And I think their defense is going to start out really tough. Even though they did lose their defensive coordinator, Andy Avalos, there's a lot of at least production returning on that. And even though they lost their quarterback and their skill positions from last year's team, they got a little bit of a tough first game there at Florida State, and I think that the Florida State, it looks like the side that's getting bet on right now. Their season win total at 10. They better not drop that BYU game or at Utah State. So that's kind of where it keys in on that 10. Wouldn't you say so?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the swing game it's all going to come down to the Utah State game at the end of the season. That's their biggest opponent, the hurdle that they have to have as far as the Mountain West Conference goes. And as we roll through the Mountain West, you're going to see that there's really only 4 or 5 teams that I think have a legitimate shot. There are a lot of teams on the bottom. They're all pretty much, I group them in that same category. So when we get to the have-nots, they could beat up on one another. There's a couple coaches on the hot seat. A team that doesn't have any shot, and we'll talk about them real quick. I'll just throw them in because I'm here in Vegas in UNLV. Tony Sanchez needs to get to a bowl game this year, or just get to that 500 mark. Or he's not going to be here next year. They're not going to go into the new Raider Stadium. That's going to be big for UNLV. Where they play at right now is, basically a cow pasture. I mean, it's just...
I've been there.
Okay. Sam Boyd Stadium is, it was fine in its day, but boy, its day passed a long time ago. So for them moving to a new facility and getting to play in Raider Stadium, I remember what that did for the Pitt Panthers after the Panthers had their glory years in the 80s with Tony Dorsett and Dan Marino and all of that, but then the program fell off the radar for a while. When they left and went to Heinz Field with the Steelers, I mean, it just gave them, you started to get new recruits because, now you've got a practice facility that's state-of-the-art and everything else. And you're going to get better recruits. And so UNLV, to add to that, they're not going to want to go with Tony Sanchez, that although he was one of the best high school coaches in, the country at Bishop Gorman, he hasn't shown that he could do that on a college level. You're not going to get those big name recruits trying to come here and play at at the new stadium. So they will make a big name hire when they replace Tony Sanchez, and he's got to perform or he'll be out. And I just think it'll be out because the team's not very good.
Mm-hmm. I remember going out to Sam Boyd Stadium, seeing my Badgers, and I'm like, this place is that far from the Strip? This is years ago. And
that wasn't the game that the power went out, was it?
No, but there's a lot of rumors about that one. That was a couple of years.
It went out just in time not to make that game official.
I think it was you out there, Marco, chopping with the axe at the electric boards out there. I don't know. That's a rumor anyway.
Well, yeah, I wasn't here in Vegas yet, so I can't be blamed for that one. I hadn't moved yet. I was at Candlestick on the Monday night game when the Steelers played the 49ers and the power went out. I was there for that one. That was fun.
I do remember that, man. But about Sam Boyd Stadium, it took forever to get out of there, and that's all I wanted to do. I'm like, what the hell? The Badgers are up by 50 points. Why do I even want to be here? It's kind of like one of those situations. Bring me back to the blackjack table. Yeah, I'm like right out of college. So that was my experience. But it's great that they're going to be playing at the Raiders Stadium. This team was minus 1.2 yards per play. Just brutal last year. Four is their win total. They're not even worth really discussing. But another team that is worth discussing from how good they were last year, beating Arizona State in the Las Vegas Bowl, is Fresno State. Wow. I was shocked they lost to Minnesota last year. I'm actually high on Minnesota this year, but last year they dropped that game. I thought they should have been the better team, but then they just ran the table, lost at Boise State, and then they won the Mountain West Championship game, cashing a few tickets there. They're at plus 475, lost a lot of production. Where are we at here?
Yeah, the offense only brings 3 starters back, and they're going to have to rely on JUCO transfer Jorge Reyna is the guy that's going to be stepping in for Marcus McMarion. And similar to him, he can run the football as well. So you've got that dual threat quarterback. It's going to take time, but we've seen Jeff Tedford, as far as coaches go, this guy year in and year out manages to get the most out of his players. I love him as a coach. He's a good guy to back. It's going to be hard to replicate last year's production with everybody, that they have to replace. This is a team that led the Mountain West, also finished 17th in the nation in total defense. That's going to be the strong suit once again. They've got 6 returning on defense, including basically the entire front defensive line. Speaking of lines, though, that offensive line only brings back 1 starter. When you only have 3 returning starters and you only have 1 on the offensive line, as I said in the first segment, the offensive line is the key and lifeblood to the offense. I think what you'll see is Fresno State struggle a little bit early in the season as the offense finds its footing. You get those offensive linemen, they got to play together. They got to learn their blocking schemes. That's why it's so crucial when you've got guys that have played together for an entire season, maybe 2, and you've got that returning. You're so far ahead of the curve of other teams in that aspect. Now you throw in a new quarterback on top of that. There's going to be growing pains on offense. So they're going to have to rely on that defense to get things done at the beginning. Fresno State has to play San Diego State on the road. That could be the game that decides the division. You look at the schedules for these teams. Fresno State's lucky they don't play Boise State this year. They do play Utah State, which I feel is the other contender out of the other division, but they catch them at home. So outside of the big game at San Diego State, Fresno State, they should be able to get themselves back in the mix for the Mountain West Conference Championship. And I think it comes down to, as I said, that San Diego State game is the game, the key game on the schedule, and that one's in the middle of November, which it's good for them that their toughest game will be later in the season, because if you've got an offense that has to replace as much as they did, you want your toughest games to be later in the season, because you're going to be able to have all of the kinks worked out of the system, and you'll be playing better the second half of the season than you would the first half, just as we talked about Nebraska. But the problem for Fresno State is they could get beat up the first 2 games of the season. They're out of conference schedule. You open up at USC, not good. And then you talked about this Minnesota team. This Minnesota team, a lot of people like them as the sleeper in the Big Ten in their division. They bring back a lot. Their defense is going to be phenomenal, and that's going to be a problem for Fresno State in this first game, as I said, getting this offense on track. So Fresno State could open the season 0-2.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And then that's where, the problems, sometimes things can unravel a little bit, but you've got to keep your goals, intact. Fresno State knows they're not playing for a national championship. So, having their second loss in the second week of the season really means nothing. Their goal is the Mountain West Conference, and you concentrate on that and get yourself better so that you can get to the championship game.
Well, I'd like to start out saying that Jeff Tedford, I'm shocked that he's still there after such a great season last year. I thought he would have been one of those coaches that goes to a larger Power 5 type program. He did such a fantastic job over there. Like you said, when it comes to these smaller conferences, I almost rate returning production a little bit more important, because they're not getting those 4- and 5-star recruits. They're kind of relying on senior play. Great point about how they have to start out with such a hard couple games there, and if they're going to do anything, it's going to be towards the end of this schedule here. It's a little bit of a tough run at Hawaii, Utah State at home, and then at San Diego State right there. So we'll see if this team still has some heart left by that time. According to Bill Conley's ratings, they rank 129th in returning production out of 130 teams. That's
not good.
No, that is not good at all, my man. Let's move on to Utah State here. Second to Boise State in the mountain there, plus 750 to win it all. 6.5 juice to the over is their season win total. They were a plus 1.84 yards per play last year, which was pretty amazing. They almost had Michigan State last year when the season kicked off. It was a close game. They lost 38-31, then just ran the table until they lost to Boise State somehow. That was a tough loss for them. Just young kids, I think. The returning production wasn't great. Got a quarterback at Jordan Love. That's awesome, but they lose everybody but their left tackle, it looks like. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this Utah State team, Marco?
Well, this is a team that, as you said, last year they were one of the surprise teams. Jordan Love, just what a season he had last year. Having him back's a big plus, but as we said, the offensive line, you're only bringing back two offensive starters, one on the offensive line and your quarterback. That's not, real good. They do have a couple targets that he can throw to, but it's going to be what they need. Is last year they were averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground. When you've got a running game like that, and as good as Jordan Love was, it made him better because defenses can't key on one thing. You can't stack the line to try to stop that potent running game. They're going to go over the top of you. You can't, try to drop back in coverage to try to protect yourself against the pass because they're going to pound the football up the middle on you. They're not going to have that dual threat at the beginning of the season. The running game will be fine as the season progresses, but again, the offensive line's going to need time to gel. This is a team, defensively, they returned 7 starters from a defense that allowed just 380 yards per game last year and 22 points. Again, 22 points in today's college football, the way teams run hurry-ups and everybody wants to go up and down the field, that is, a phenomenal stat. I think the defense, again, is what they're going to have to lean on with those starters back, and that'll keep them in the games. The offense will be better later in the season. And you look at scheduling-wise, this is a team that never has to play back-to-back road games. That is the benefit that they get, where there's a few teams that have, back-to-back road games or 3 and 4 games, that definitely is a disadvantage. But what they do have is they have to face San Diego State, Fresno State, and I'll throw Air Force in there because if I went 5 deep on our looking at the teams, Air Force would be the next one in there. They do face all 3 of those teams on the road. Mm-hmm. That's going to be tough for them. Now, fortunately for them, their biggest game of the season comes, as we mentioned when we talked about Boise State, on November 23rd. If they can somehow get through that 3 games on the road against those 3 teams, if they can win 2 out of 3 of those, they're going to set themselves up for playing for the division title, and that'll come down to the game against Boise. And they do get Boise at home, and they get them late in November, when this team will have much more experience than they will those first few games of the season. So from that aspect, they catch a break there, but those other 3 teams on the road doesn't make things good for Utah State. I like this team, but I think there's going to be a little bit too much hype in regards to the quarterback, and there was even talk that he was like a long shot sleeper to put up numbers. They did stuff like that, if you remember, a couple of years ago with Allen at Wyoming, and then that's his senior year. He was banged up, we'll put the asterisk to it, but he never lived up to the hype that year and hurt him a little bit in his draft stock. I think there's a little bit too much hype on Jordan Love. I love him, but it's excuse the pun there. I love, but it's a situation where because the offense is going to have growing pains, he's not going to have the numbers that he had last year. And if the running game isn't as potent as last year's was, that's going to be a detriment to him as well.
Yeah, with the new coach there too, Gary Anderson. He coached Utah State back a while ago, but I thought he was more of a pistol guy, like a little bit more of a fast play pistol style offense, which Love would be running more in it, correct?
Correct.
And so if you look at Love's rushing yards last year, well, there wasn't really any. I think he got a total of 63 yards. I being a Badger fan, watching Gary Anderson, what he did there, and then what he did at Oregon State, I'm pretty low on the guy. So Utah State might even be a fade team for me. Like you said, they don't replace a lot there, and there's some tough stretches. Jordan Love will have to do it himself if they're going to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, with that offensive line, he may be running for his life.
Absolutely, my man. Well, the last team worth talking about, I suppose, here is San Diego State, and I have a little bit of a play on them, and I wanted you to get started first and talk about what the Aztecs can possibly do this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, last year was a year that I've never seen from a Rocky Long team. They couldn't run the football. When you talk about San Diego State, first and foremost, it begins with the running game. Every year, how many backs have we seen come out of San Diego State with, big numbers year after year? And last year, they just couldn't get it done. I think you'll see that change this year. And it hurt because of the running game struggling as much as it did. It hurt the passing game because, again, and I say it so many times, and it's both on the college level and the NFL level. You give me an average quarterback with a good running game, and it's going to take that average quarterback and make him a good quarterback. It's going to upgrade him one notch for sure. But and you take a good quarterback and add a running game to it, and he's going to be great. San Diego State last year didn't have the running game. It hurt the passing game. Teams were able to, bog down, jam the line, put 8 guys in a box, whatever. They just couldn't throw the football at all last year. No consistency with their quarterbacks. They do bring back 7 starters. That's the good news. The bad news is those 7 starters were on an offense that finished 111th out of 130 last year, averaging just under 21 points a game, and they went the entire football season only topping the 30-point mark once all year. You can't win in college football today with offenses like that. Last year, when Christian Chapman was hurt, Ryan Agnew got the job. 52% completions, not a high percentage. He had 1,650 yards last year, 10 touchdown passes, but he had 6 interceptions. Got to clean up the touchdown-to-interception ratio. And I think, again, a lot of that had to do with the inconsistency of the running game. If they get the running game going early, it's going to make the quarterback better. And I think as the season moves on, San Diego State's going to be just fine. The defense last year, the run defense was the best in the Mountain West, and it was 7th overall in the nation. And that's what kept them in a lot of those games last year was that defense. But the thing is, as good as the numbers were, yardage-wise and against the run, they only allowed 20 points or less 4 times for the entire season. They still managed to always give up one of those big plays, a breakdown in the secondary or something, and give up that cheap score. They need to clean that up this year. And you look at the defense, it brings back 6 on the defense, but nobody returns on that defensive line. So you're going to have a little bit of growing pains there. I don't think they'll get good rush pursuit on the quarterbacks this year early on. Later in the season, they will. But fortunately for them, scheduling-wise, they get some breaks. They catch the 2 big rivals that's on their schedule, Fresno State, and then we just talked about how Utah State and the talent that they have. They get both of them at home. That's a plus. Fresno State, obviously they play every year. They miss Boise State, though. They don't have to play Boise State, and they don't have to play Air Force, which would be, in my opinion, the fifth toughest team in the conference. So from the scheduling standpoint, I like San Diego State's schedule. I think they close the gap back, and it's going to come down to Fresno State, San Diego State, in that matchup head-to-head. I think Rocky Long gets things turned back around this year. I like what he has to start with more than Fresno State, and throw in the schedule on top of that. I'll go ahead and make San Diego State to win their side of the Mountain West Conference.
I do too. I think San Diego State, there is some value on them at plus 160 to win the West there. And you could have taken the plus 475 to win the whole thing. But when you do the break-even analysis on the extra game against Boise State, it comes out to minus 121. And I think Boise State, as according to most power ratings right now, is laying minus 200. So I just thought if you're not going to take both and expose yourself more, you probably take the West at plus 160 there, and I thought that was, I thought it was a good play for some of the things that you said. They get Fresno State at home. Fresno State lost all of that production. They were -3 in turnover ratio last year. You hope to see some improvement there. Where was this team that beat Arizona State, a tough Eastern Michigan team in the MAC, that everyone was on Eastern Michigan there, and then beat Boise State? And then Air Force. What happened to this team, right? They kind of faltered down the stretch at the end, and I think it's because Fresno State had such a lead, they kind of gave up and lost that overtime game at Hawaii. But this team, I think they have a very manageable schedule against Weber State. At UCLA is probably a loss, but then they go at New Mexico State and then get Utah State at home. And then they have it pretty easy for a while until they face Fresno State at home. So definitely liking that. Any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, just when you said where was this team that beat Arizona State, I go to the Nevada game in October there. It was late October. I had San Diego State in that game, and I had them big. They jumped out 14-0, like soon as they, first two times they touched the football, and boom, it's 14-0. I'm cruising. I'm like, hey, this is great. Big play for me. And they had a couple turnovers in that game, and one of the turnovers really had a lasting effect in the game because it was their most productive running back that fumbled. And Rocky Long has a thing where you fumble, you sit. And he took his most effective guy out of the game because of that fumble. And they never got the running game going again. Finally, late in the third quarter, fourth quarter, he brought the guy back. They made a game of it. I think it was 28-24 was the final score. But from that game on, that team was never the same. And you look at that, when they lost that game, they only won one more game all year, and that was against New Mexico. It was a 12-point favorite where they won and didn't cover, and they even lost to UNLV as a 24-point favorite. You will see a different Rocky Long team this year. I guarantee you, and I love taking them to win their side of the division.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're in agreement with me, Marco. That makes me feel a lot better about my play. So, excellent. Well, let's get into before we get into NFL preseason week 3, do you have any other just quick thoughts without giving up too much information on any other college teams you're kind of low or high on?
Well, I tell you, one of the teams that I think is going to be improved from last year, and they're going to fly under the radar because they're going to be, the little redheaded stepchild of the division because they're going to be sitting behind Ohio State and Michigan, and that's Michigan State. This team, their defense is scary. It was scary last year. It's going to be scary again this year. The problem last year was the offense was so pathetic. They could not score any points last year. They had no imagination on offense. Quarterback Lewerke was horrible. He was banged up at one point, missed the end of the season. I think that they've got the tools there, if Lewerke can just make any strides moving forward, this is a team that with that defense, if they can put some points on the board, they're going to win games and they might be able to get some separation. Last year they couldn't do that with that offense. Can they overcome Michigan and Ohio State? Probably not, but I think there are going to be some good spots this year to jump on them. I know their season win total took a major jump. They just put a bad number out on them to open it. They were at 7 and 7.5. Now they're at 8, and you're juiced to the over on that 8. But this is a team that's definitely better than their record was last year.
Yeah, let's hope so. This team going in a snowstorm to Nebraska, playing their type of football, only scoring 6 points against the 96th ranked defense last year, definitely made me think about how bad your offense could be. And then their bowl game, I think they only scored 6 or 7 points as well. But we've seen Lewerke the year before do pretty well, right? And people are saying he was hurt. So if that's truly the case, then there's a lot of sharp people on this. And you're a very sharp person, Marco. So you agree with a lot of the other ones as well. So that's fantastic right there, my man. Well, let's get into a little bit, and we only got 6-7 minutes here. But NFL preseason week 3. Any thoughts on week 3?
Well, obviously, it is what is known as the dress rehearsal around the NFL. This is where you'll see the starters for the most playing time. Now, we have seen in recent years some of the younger guns are going different route in preseason as far as playing starters. We saw the Rams not play starters all last year. They didn't care. They didn't care about winning the games. They didn't care about they got their work into practice. And I think that because more and more teams are doing these scrimmages with their other teams, they are getting more out of the practices than they are during the preseason games. So we are seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard there. But I do have a play that I think looks pretty good this week in preseason action, and that's the Green Bay Packers at the Oakland Raiders. Oakland's got 2 wins so far, but the first win was against the Rams, which I just got done saying the Rams don't give one iota about preseason, okay? They want just get players in and get them out. They don't run anything special on offense. So that win means absolutely nothing to me. And then they beat an Arizona team, and you're right out there. You know what's sitting out there in Arizona. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot there. You got a rookie quarterback that whenever the blitz came, looked like a deer caught in headlights. Again, a dominating win. It got closer at the end, but they were so far ahead, and the defense was just in prevent, mode. The Raiders are not as good as their 2-0 record looks. Now you flip it to the other side and look at Green Bay. They played Houston in week 1, and although they played Houston's backup quarterback, Webb, for Houston had to play him the whole game. They didn't want to play Deshaun Watson, and they had some other injuries. So Webb played the entire game. Now you say, well, he's a backup, so that's actually a benefit. No, it's not. It's a benefit for Houston because even though it's a backup, the fact that you play all 4 quarters, you get a rhythm. And when you get to the 4th quarter and you've been in there the whole game and now you're facing the other team's 3s and 4s, that's a huge advantage. And Houston was able, to play well in that game, put up some numbers, so Green Bay didn't look as impressive. And then last week, they played the best team in all of preseason football. They played Baltimore. Yeah. John Harbaugh is the preseason guru. This guy, him, Zimmer, and Pete Carroll, are the 3 best coaches in preseason football. Mm-hmm. And John Harbaugh is just whatever he does, they win in preseason. So Green Bay went against, they had 2 bad situations, I feel, and played much tougher opponents than Oakland did. I think Green Bay is the team this week. You'll see some of Rodgers this week. Again, you won't see a lot, but you're going to see him that you haven't. The Raider defense is still bad. You saw how bad they got scorched late in the game against Arizona. Granted, the game, it was garbage time, but still, I'm not sold on the Raiders. The value is with Green Bay. The market saw that as well. Oakland opened the favorite. They're no longer the favorite. I'm seeing it 2.5 on Green Bay and even up to 3. I don't get too excited and worried about these games where, the line moves from small favorite one side to the small favorite the other side, and then everybody goes, "Oh, that's a 4 or 5 point move. We can't do that." It is a 4 or 5 point move technically, but it's not a 5 point move where the line was 3 and now it's 8. That's a whole different animal. You're just talking about basically you still just have to win the football game, and I'm looking at Green Bay. And if you don't want to lay the 2.5 or 3, you can lay the money line and just have Green Bay win the game. I don't see Oakland winning the game.
Well, there you go, my man. And funny, when the Raiders did get run up in points, it was Brett Hundley running up the score there, and it wasn't Kyler Murray. So, Hundley looked like a preseason champion, right? Throwing the ball.
Oh, we've got some guys that do very well in preseason football. That's for sure. The guy from Minnesota, his name's slipping my mind right now, but he's like a Hall of Famer preseason quarterback. But yes, it's different. And I got one bonus for your listeners, Kiev.
Cool.
I'm not a homer, you know that. I bet against them as much as I bet with them. But I think the best value, and I got this early in the summer at plus 180. I'm sorry, I took that out. You guys want to, follow along now. You're not going to get quite as much, but it's still there. I think you can get 150 or 160 around town. And that is to take the Pittsburgh Steelers to win the AFC North. I know Cleveland's gotten all the buzz, but Kiev, you got to pay your dues in this league. And Cleveland right now, yes, they're improved, and I'll be the first to admit that. They've got an exciting quarterback in Baker Mayfield, but here's the reality of it. It's been decades since Cleveland's been relevant. They don't know how to win. They don't know how to close out games. That's something they have to learn. It's a new coaching staff, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. They got to put it all together. Baker Mayfield, fantastic first year last year. Also had the advantage of coming in, week 3, no game film on him. Now everybody's had an off season to look at the things they did, look at what he's done, look what his tendencies are. Things will be a little tougher in year 2. Ask Dak Prescott about year 2 of his, quarterbacking career, but yet still he thinks $30 million's not enough. It's a situation where they've got to get it down. The Steelers, all the pieces are in place except Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. The coaching staff's the same. All of the other skill position players are there. This team's got continuity, and they also have a chip on their shoulder. They got something to prove this year. They want to prove that Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, they can win without them. They showed last year that with James Conner stepping in for Le'Veon Bell, they didn't miss a beat at running back. Conner got hurt late in the season, and that hurt. And if Bell would have come back in Week 10 like he was supposed to, the Steelers would have made the playoffs. Antonio Bell, yes, he's a great wide receiver, but, man, he's not worth the drama. And the Raiders are seeing that right now, and the entire world's seeing that because they're under the microscope being the Raiders on Hard Knocks and everything else. I think the Steelers get the job done. This was the best training camp they've had under Tomlin. No drama, team totally focused. You give me the Steelers at plus money to win the division. Who else is there? Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. He's going to have to show that he can throw the football to win in the NFL. You're not going to get through an entire season running the football. They managed to do that a few games last year, but it got exposed in the playoffs by the Chargers. Steelers to win, I think it's an excellent bet at plus money.
Shocking, Marco. You probably have your Steelers jersey on as you're giving that to us, don't you there?
I'll wave the terrible towel. It's hanging on the side of the desk.
No, man. I think you're right there. It's a lot different when you come into a season as the underdog than coming into the season the favorite when everybody's got a target on you and everybody had to watch you slam that beer. I think it's a little bit different. And and so I do see Cleveland being a little bit overpriced, let's say, in the market there. Thanks so much, Marco, for coming on. Really appreciate you giving us the time. Where can our listeners find your fantastic plays for the upcoming season?
Yeah, you head over to wagertalk.com. You'll see all of our handicappers over there. And Kiev, yes, we sell picks at WagerTalk, but we have so much free information available at our site. Check out our YouTube channel, WagerTalk TV. Subscribe to that. Guys, we do videos every week, breaking down games, handicapping angles. We answer questions from Twitter. People ask us handicapping questions. We're constantly trying to teach people how to beat this game. And, at the end of the day, yes, we do sell picks. If you don't have the time to do this yourself and you need help, we're there for that. But we'll give you all the tools and things that you need to help you be a handicapper on your own. So check it out, wagertalk.com.
Well, it's an exciting time, Marco. Thanks again for coming on. Everybody, make sure you check him out on YouTube and check out wagertalk.com for all of that free information that they give out. Really appreciate you again, Marco, and I'm going to see you next weekend.
All right, buddy. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, everybody, that was a great show with Marco D'Angelo. If you have any questions for us, please tweet us at The Odds Breakers. Have a fantastic week 1A in college football and go get some winners.